Jajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiro Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gobijana Bhalava Givaradari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajaka Sthita Satashi Shima Chidandi Goswami Shilesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivajaka Sthita Satashi Shima Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Shri Prabhupada. Jai. I'm wondering, one problem with this sitting arrangement is you are all having your backs to Srila Prabhupada. And generally, anyway, I don't know. In other temples, well, in the Henry Street Temple, we had the speaker facing this way, and the devotees, women on one side and men on the other side.
This is the way it used to be here too. Speaker would face that way and then would sit over there. Somehow it changed. I don't know. We can move the seats if you want.
Should we try it?
Sure.
Okay. Let's, I think it's better.
Is it because of the microphone arrangement also?
Is it the microphone doesn't
I mean, there's enough wire for it to reach. There's a lot of wire there.
Let's just try it. Okay. let's just.
Do you want to face this and we hit?
No, I face this way, and men, women on this side, men on the other. Okay? Like this. Then it's just a bit more, yeah. Also, I get to look, I'd rather go in the, what do you think, Gopal? All right. Yeah, rearrangement. More kind of. All right, yeah. What do you think?
I don't know what to think of.
Better arrangement? I don't know. Anyway.
You like being broadside to the deity.
Yeah, and also the men don't have to have their backs to Srila Prabhupada and like that. All right, anyway. The language of furniture. I don't know how many of you probably haven't had the time to, with the GBC SPT, we've been doing a series on, yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we've been doing a series on the GBC, in the history of the GBC. And you are all too young, except for Chandrasekhar Maharaj and Atita and I, to remember, but maybe you've heard of the Zonal Acharya days.
The story you're about to hear is true. Only the names of it.
One of our godbrothers described the condition that devotees had succumbed to, in his words, as dads, the dreaded Acharya disease syndrome. But anyway, during those days, we were all confused. We were quite confused about how, what to do. Srila Prabhupada had left. And he, I think it was both that he's, I mean, it's been a question in my mind for, well, all the time. Why didn't he give us more specific directions on what to do after his departure in respect of why did it end up that we speculated, we ended up following different people and different ideas and this and that, and anyway, my kind of conclusion is that just like the baby chicks are thrown out of, or the baby birds are thrown out of the nest because they've got to learn to fly, so similarly we had to learn. And we learned, unfortunately, we had to make mistakes in order to learn. And one of those mistakes could be seen in the language of furniture. Because in those days, the Vyasas, there were different Vyasasans for various, there was Prabhupada's Vyasasan, then there was the zonal guru's asana, and then there was the visiting zonal guru's asana, and then there was everyone else's asana. it was, and which, the heights and this and that. Anyhow. So if you're interested, you can tune in to GBC SPT on YouTube and listen to the History of the GBC series. Hare Krishna. Now we will listen to the history of Vidura. he had his issues too. I don't know if furniture was involved, but Hare Krishna. Well, there is. I mean, you have not furniture, but architecture. We have the occasion of Krishna's visit to Hastinapur, and how instead of going to the wonderful architecture that Duryodhana's palace was created with, he went instead to Vidura, right? Vidura's more humble dwelling. And then we have the extraordinary incidents of Vidura's wife offering. She didn't expect. I mean, Krishna's arriving. It's expected. It's everyone expected. Duryodhana especially expected that Krishna was going to come, and of course, he's the this is the protocol, right? That he should come and first come to Dhritarashtra's palace and Duryodhana's great arrangement, this wonderful, wonderful palace that he had created. Everything was ready just to receive Krishna. Although they had no intention of listening to him, but to receive him, to do the right thing. So everyone is expecting, but he doesn't go there. He goes instead to Vidura, and Vidura is not expecting him to come. His wife is not expecting, and then they've got to offer him something. So she had some bananas there, and she quickly prepares the bananas and peels them and puts them on a plate, and she offers the plate, and Krishna but she's offering the peels of the banana, and Krishna takes it and eats them. This is extraordinary. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Well, we're going to hear more about Krishna in this verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, we're continuing the Srimad Bhagavatam, questions by Vidura. And I believe we are, which is the text for today?
41, 42. 42. 3.1.42.
Yeah. Yeah, 42.
41, yes.
Right. Text 42, 3:1, text 42. Soham harer matya vidambanena.
Soham harer matya vidambanena.
Drisho nrinam chalayato vidhatu.
Drisho nrinam chalayato vidhatu.
Nanyo palakshya padavim prasadat.
Nanyo palakshya padavim prasadat.
Charami Pashyan Gasha Vishmayotra Gata Vishmayotra. Let me get my glasses clear. Soham Hare Martya Vidambanena Drisho Nrinam Chalayato Vidhatu Nanyo Palakshya Padavim Prasadat Charami Pashyan Gata Vishmayotra. Maharaj?
Soham harer matya vidambanena.
Soham Hare Matya Vidambanena
Yonranam Kalayato Vidatu
Yashodhanam Kalayato Vidatu
Nanyo Palakshya Padavim Prasadat Charami Pasyan Gata Vishmayotra
Soham Hare Martya Vidam Panena
Soham Hare Madhya Vidambanena
Viso Nrinam Chalayato Vidatu
Nirvaranam Kalayato Vidatu
Nanyo Palakshya Palavin Prasada
Nanyo Palakshya Padavim Prasadat
Charami Pasyan Gata Bhismayotra
Charami Pasya Gata Vishmayotra Soham Hare Madhya Vidambanena Drishyo Nrinam Chalayato Vidatu Nanyo Palakshya Padavim Prasadat Charami Pasya Gata Vishmayotra
Soham Hare Matya Vidambanena Govinda.
Nanyo Palakshya Padavim Prasadat Charami Pasya Gata Vishmayotra
Ladies. Soham Hare Matya Vidambanena Vishamnanam Chalayato Vidatu Nanyo Palakshya Padavim Prasadat Charam Yegdasyam Gadavishmayotra Saham. Therefore I, Hare, of the personality of Godhead, Martya, in this mortal world, Vidambanena, without being recognized, Drishaha, on sight, Nrinam, of the people in general, Chalayata, bewildering, Vidatu, in order to do it, Na, not, Anya, other, Upalakshya, seen by others, Padavim, glories, Prasadat, by the grace of, Charami, do travel, Pashyan, by seeing, Gatavishmaya, without doubt, Atra, in this matter. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. I am not astonished at this, having traveled over the world without being seen by others. The activities of the personality of Godhead, which are like those of a man in this mortal world, are bewildering to others, but I know of His greatness by His grace, and thus I am happy in all respects. Purport. Although he was the brother of Dhritarashtra, Vidura was completely different. By the grace of Lord Krishna, he was not foolish like his brother, and thus his brother's association could not influence him. Dhritarashtra and his materialistic sons wanted to falsely lord it over the world by dint of their own strength. The Lord encouraged them in this, and thus they became more and more bewildered. But Vidura wanted to achieve sincere devotional service of the Lord, and therefore became a soul absolutely surrendered to the absolute personality of Godhead. He could realize this in the progress of his pilgrim's journey, and thus he was freed from all doubts. He was not at all sorry to be bereft of his hearth and home, because he now had experience that dependence on the mercy of the Lord is a greater freedom than so-called freedom at home. A person should not be in the renounced order of life unless he is firmly convinced of being protected by the Lord. This stage of life is explained in Bhagavad Gita as abhayam sattva sangshuddhihi. Every living entity is factually completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord, but unless one is in the pure state of existence, he cannot be established in this position. This stage of dependence is called sattva sangshuddhihi, or purification of one's existence. The result of such purification is exhibited in fearlessness. A devotee of the Lord, who is called Narayana Para, is never afraid of anything, because he is always aware of the fact that the Lord protects him in all circumstances. With this conviction, Vidura traveled alone, and he was not seen or recognized by any friend or foe. Thus, he enjoyed freedom of life without obligation to the many duties of the world. When Lord Sri Krishna was personally present in the mortal world in his eternal blissful form of Shama Sundar, those who were not pure devotees of the Lord could not recognize him or know his glories. Avajananti mam mudha manushim tanum ashritam. Bhagavad Gita 9:11. He is always bewildering to the non-devotees, but he is always seen by the devotees by dint of their pure devotional service to him. Om Agyanatamarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshumiltam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachanam Mangundaya Tesim Jatkipatam Hunde Shri Tatari Parmanam. Hare Krishna. So, we're continuing Vidura's questions that have now moved into a little more about himself and what is his. He's moved from questioning about his relatives and his friends and Krishna himself to reflecting on his own life in the previous verse, he begins by his lamentation for Dhritarashtra. He explains how he was driven out of his own house for no fault. He says, although I am a sincere well-wisher, but simply because he was trying to advise Dhritarashtra to give up this hopeless campaign urged on by his son Duryodhana. Duryodhana, not Dhritarashtra himself, simply went along with Dhritarashtra's anger and forceful denunciation of Vidura, expelling him from the kingdom. But now Vidura explains in this verse that he says, I'm not astonished at this. I'm not astonished at what happened. Having traveled over the world without being seen by others, I'm not astonished. Srila Prabhupada uses the term here, and I think he uses it earlier on when Vidura leaves. The term pilgrim's journey is used. I can't remember, didn't have time to really study much for today, but I wanted to look it up because I remember that when Vidura first leaves home, Srila Prabhupada uses this term pilgrim's journey. I was curious, of Srila Prabhupada's choice. Some of you who have studied or done some English literature are maybe familiar with The Pilgrim's Progress, a famous book, which I heard of. And I think I may have looked at it in college days or something like that, but I couldn't remember what it was all about. I looked it up again now to see, what was that? Because the term pilgrim's journey is some connotation. That was an allegory of, in the context of a dream. But it was I think we all, the idea of being a pilgrim, the concept of being a pilgrim. What is a pilgrim? In Christian terms, a pilgrim is one, and there are paths of pilgrims. Very famous pathway of pilgrimage in the Christian world is what is it, Santiago de Compostela. In Spain, there's a route that people take to go from some part of Spain, to this one place as pilgrims. And the way of the pilgrim means giving up one's home, leaving home, taking shelter is the way of the pilgrim, entering into the unknown also. Here in America, the term pilgrim is most associated with those who left England, or actually they were English, but they left from the Netherlands because they had been persecuted in England, and they were seeking some place to live without persecution. And they set forth, again, without knowing what would happen, for the new world. Prior to their arrival in, what was it, 14 something or 15 something? What was it? I don't know. Anyway.
1492, you're talking about
That's Columbus.
Yeah, Columbus.
1492, sailed the ocean blue. We learn some rhymes to remember those, but the Mayflower Pilgrims were later, maybe 15 something, 15, 16, I think. But anyhow, they were traveling with dependence. They were pilgrims. They were surrendered to God and the shelter of God and the dependence on God. And of course it was the Indian Native Americans who saved them, but they were sent by the grace of God, they might be thinking. But they were on the pilgrim's journey. So we also must adopt the pilgrim's path. But that path is better described by Bhaktivinoda Thakur as Sharanagati, the path of surrender. And this is also described in this purport, that Vidura wanted to achieve sincere devotional service of the Lord, and therefore became a soul absolutely surrendered to the absolute personality of Godhead. He could realize this in the progress of his pilgrim's journey, and thus he was freed from all doubts. So for us, we can see the pilgrim's journey is the path of surrender. So what is that path? So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, particularly, we have this verse, which I believe is from Hari Bhakti Vilas, I think, actually, I'm not, right? Anukulya, this is Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22:100, if you want to look it up. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjinam rakshishyati vishvasho rakshishyati vishvasho gopritye varanam tata atma nikshepa karpanye sadvidha sananagati. These are the 6 qualities of the path of Sharanagati, the path of surrender. Translation: the 6 divisions of surrender are the acceptance of those things favorable to devotional service. Anukulyasya sankalpa. Anukulyasya sankalpa. The rejection of unfavorable things. Pratikulyasya varjanam. Pratikulyasya varjanam. The conviction that Krishna will give protection. Rakshishyati vishvasho. Vishvasho. Vishvash. Those who are... do you have any... No. Bengalis in the room here? No, not right now. The Bengali family left? Okay. Vishvash. One of the words we learned early. Kola Vishvash. Basically, we would say it when I don't believe you. That's when I first learned the term in my... because when I went to Mayapur in 1976, from here, from Henry Street in Brooklyn, not Henry Street, excuse me, 55th Street in Manhattan, my first service was construction. And so I had to learn Bengali in order to deal with the workers. And one of the first terms I learned is, Amar kono vishwas nai. Basically, I don't believe you. Because they would say things. Mithyakata, that's another one. False words. These are the kind of early, if you have a little book of common phrases that you need to get along in the country, right? So in dealing with that situation, the common words, I don't believe you, you're talking lies. Those are things I needed to learn. So Vishwash. Vishwasha. The conviction that Krishna will give protection. The acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master. Goptritve. Goptritve. Varanam tata. To accept Goptritve, that Krishna is my guardian, my master, my protector, my maintainer. Full self-surrender and humility. Atma nikshepa karpanye. Full self-surrender, karpanye, humility. These are the division. This is the path. This is the path of Sharana, of surrender. This is our pilgrim's journey. And Vidura exemplifies this. He exemplifies all of these qualities, beginning with anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. As soon as he saw that this situation, he was remaining in the palace, remaining there, as long as he had service, as long as there was some service for him to somehow serve the mission of Krishna. Krishna wanted to save Dhritarashtra. He wanted to save Duryodhana. He wanted to save them from their path of destruction. He tried in so many different ways to appeal to their good sense. But they just couldn't hear, they just couldn't see. And finally, it was obvious to Vidura by the words of Duryodhana that there was no more hope. No more hope. So in that way, he had accepted that position. He had remained there in great difficulty also. Although he had his home, he had his situation, but he had to tolerate the abusive qualities of his nephews. But then he gave it up because it was no longer favorable for devotional service. And he accepted the renounced path because that was then favorable. And he went fully the other direction. That's also described here. That by the grace of the Lord Krishna, he was not foolish. Like his brother, Dhritarashtra. They wanted to lord it over the world. And the Lord encouraged them in this. That was another interesting part of this purport. How did the Lord encourage them? He encouraged them through the same way he encourages all materialistic people. You want? You want? You want? All right, here is the way. This is the way. I am in your heart. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto vatak smitir jnana vabhohanam cha. I will give you knowledge, I'll give you remembrance, I'll give you opportunity, you go. But Vidura was not like that. He wanted devotional service. He was absolutely surrendered. And he was dependent. So he anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyati vishvasho. He had this faith. He had this complete faith in the Lord's protection. Now, when I read this and I was thinking, what does this mean? Faith in the Lord's protection. Does it mean that we are convinced that nothing can hurt us? The Lord will protect me, therefore I don't need to take any precautions in this world. I just go forth as I like. This question has come up in relationship to our pandemic. And I won't, try to get into the controversies of vaccination, etc. But the basic principle, now, whether or not this particular, you may feel that there's something going on here or whatever, but the principle, should I take precautions? Should I do something to protect myself if there's some situation that might cause difficulty? When we're exhorted to be fearless, we shouldn't be foolish. Prabhupada talks about that. That fearlessness does not mean that we are invincible. To be fearless in this world does not to be illusioned with an idea of being invincible, untouchable by the forces of nature. That would be very foolish. Rather, it means that we are firmly convinced that Krishna will take care of us in His way, in the way that is best for us. We are convinced that we are not of this world. We're convinced that whatever happens to my physical body can never affect, in any real sense, my actual being as spirit, as pure spirit, not the body. To be convinced of that my body may be killed, my body may become sick, and this is happening. Tomorrow we'll be observing the disappearance of one of our beloved God brothers, certainly fully surrendered soul, certainly one who is on this path completely. And yet it was somehow or other the arrangement of Krishna that he contract this disease and leave this world on its shoulders. That was Krishna's plan for him. We have to be convinced of that. Of course, sometimes we may also do foolish things, and we may also have to accept and see that what is happening to me is the result of my actions, Therefore we have that exhortation by Brahma, Tatenu kampam shushumik shamano bunjane vatma kritam vipakam, that I accept whatever is happening to me, whatever is going on, as being my own karma. And yet the acharyas explain, and just to continue that, hridvagvapu bir vitatat, how is it? Vitatat namaste. Vijeta mukte sadaya bhak, mukte pade sadaya bhak. And still, though we accept and even we consider that we're actually experiencing reactions from our perspective, we look at what's happening to us and say, this is Krishna giving me some taste, he has. Generally, the devotee thinks this has been minimal reactions for my education, to teach me some lesson. This is the attitude of a devotee. And he continues, Ridbhagvapu, here, with his heart, his body, and his words to serve Krishna. So to achieve this, to adopt this principle of surrender, to feel oneself always under the protection of Krishna, is a state that we can achieve when we are never disturbed by anything that happens to us. Whatever happens, we think this is Krishna's protection. From external position, it may be, well, wait a minute, that's not protection. You just got sick, or you just got hit by a car, or, you just, but I don't know, something happened.
COVID for the second time.
Huh?
I got COVID for the second
Got COVID twice. You died. I mean, your body went into, yeah. So how can this be protection? And yet this path of surrender is, when we see it, yes, it is. I'm convinced, I have full faith, this is Krishna protecting me. I don't know. I can't understand his will fully. We have that wonderful little story of, I think it's probably in every tradition, but I heard it as a Chinese story of the man whose horse runs off. You've probably all heard this story. The man whose horse runs off, and the villagers all come around and say, "Oh, we're so sorry for you that your horse ran away." And he says, "Well, maybe good, maybe bad."
Oh, yeah.
You know that story? And so the next day his son goes out and finds the horse and gets another horse. There was another, the horse probably was a male and found a female out there. Wanted to hang out, and so now he comes back with two horses, and the villagers all come and say, "Whoa, now you got two horses, this is great." He said, "Oh, maybe good, maybe bad." And then the story all folds out where the horses, he's out training the horses, and the soldiers come, and one by one it goes from good to bad, from good to bad to good to bad, and this humble man thinks, "I don't know. I just don't know." And we don't know what we think is good, what we think is bad. There was a conversation, I wanted to print it out so I could read it out, but wonderful little snippet, courtesy of Vanipedia. And any of you who have independent income, all glories to Vishnumurti. It's I support a few things. There's different appeals, right? And give monthly donations, and Vedabase and Vanipedia. You know, they're worthy causes, very worthy causes to give, you know, because I use it all the time. And so anyway, there was this wonderful little conversation. A man was saying, what is surrender? And Srila Prabhupada's response was to be convinced that Krishna is always protecting you. But then he also said, but what about what it means to accept that anything that happens, that is Krishna. That is what even the what did the man say? Even the bad things, right? And Prabhupada's response was something like, "There's no good or bad. There's no good or bad. It's just Krishna." That is surrender. Of course, we also see in the same respect, we do look at, and Prabhupada mentioned that too, because anukulyasya, what is it? Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam, because there's no good or bad, because for the devotee, because he only accepts on the path of surrender. This is tied to that conviction of protection, because he's only accepting what is good for devotional service, and he's rejecting what is bad for devotional service. And if he does that, then anything that happens as a result, it's got to be good. It's got to be good. On the other hand, if we are not fully on this path of surrender, and we don't fully accept everything that's favorable, and we don't fully reject everything that's not so favorable, then we may get some reaction that will also be good, because it will help us to get back. So, here we have Vidura exemplifying Sharanagati, the path of surrender, the pilgrim's journey. Going off, he left everything. It doesn't say that he disguised himself, but by the fact of what he describes here, he was practically disguised. No one knew who he was. It's interesting that in the purport here, Prabhupada describes that Krishna also is unknown to everyone. Even Krishna. What to speak of Vidura, just a devotee wandering. We may meet some of these Viduras, we don't know. Therefore, on our outreach and our activities in the public, we should always be very careful, because we never know who we're going to meet. We never know who they are. I'm sure many of you have had many experiences of seeing somebody and thinking, oh, yeah, this guy, or whatever, forget about him, or what do you do? Just by, I'm sure, Gopal, I'm sure you've had plenty of experiences where you look at, this is, the one that I experienced, which was, it was a great lesson. We were moving our family to Alachua. Anyway, it's a long story. And so we'd hired there's a lot of furniture from my grandmother's house and so on, and to try to set up house. So we hired a truck, and it was my two daughters were with me, Neela and Sita were with me, and we drove down from Connecticut. And it was around 9 o'clock or something, and I think we weren't that far, but it was too late. So we were looking for, the cheapest motel that we could find. And we found one. And we pulled in. And And as I was getting the girls in, I was, taking note of the people there. And they look pretty rough. They look pretty rough, this is Georgia, I think, something like that. And they look pretty rough, and they, tattoos and, kind of strung out kind of look. And so I got the girls in, and I thought, I better make sure everything's locked up pretty well there, go check everything. So I was going back to the truck, and I passed this lady, and she looked at me and says, "Are you Hare Krishna?" And she'd seen my neck beads. "We go to the temple in Atlanta all the time, And then she pulled her arm, and there was a tattoo of Nrsingadev, and she said, "Here's my, And, completely, yes, Hare Krishna devotees, we love them, Completely not what I was expecting. So the devotees can be like that. Because I wouldn't say she's Vidura, but anyway, Vidura was traveling, no one recognized him. And here Prabhupada says that even Krishna, of course, to the materialists. But we as devotees, we take a different position because we see everyone as spirit soul. We see everyone, although we may not be yet at that level of the Uttamadhikari, to actually see that everyone's a devotee. But we can understand it we can understand, we can kind of intellectually understand that, yes, everyone is ultimately a devotee. That's who we are. We're all parts and parcels of Krishna. We're all his servants. And that's the next element of surrender. To see oneself in relationship to Krishna, to see Krishna as guardian, father, master, and to see ourselves as the servants. To see ourselves as servants, to see everyone as servants. And then finally, in this path, to simply, of course, full self-surrender, it seems to be, okay, the divisions of surrender are surrender. So how does that work? One of the 6 divisions of surrender is to surrender. But it's the actual term here is Sanskrit is Atma Nikshepa. Atma Nikshepa. To give oneself. To give oneself with humility, karpanye, understanding who we are as the tiny, insignificant, infinitesimal, 1/10,000th of the tip of a hair. That's pretty small. Pretty small. That's who we are. Inhabiting these comparatively gigantic bodies, but they're not us. We are simply these tiny servants of Krishna, wandering in this material world. Let's get back, get on the path, Sharanagati, which will lead us out of this world, back to home, back to Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Bol. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. We're out of time, but I guess if there's any question that, yes.
Well, Vijaya, you said that when he didn't have any more service to do, he he left, but
When it was no longer favorable, yes.
for a long time it wasn't favorable. His advice wasn't being taken serious anymore.
But there was still some hope. There was still some hope, and it basically. I read this. I mean, this is not. I was reading that this was his mood. That he had been staying there in the mood of service. Of course, Krishna was coming. There were various, opportunities to interact. He had service to the Pandavas. We know that he saved them from the house of lack. So he had service. And he was, all along, he was engaged in his service.
So he was like an informant.
That was part of it. He was a little bit of a spy, an inner guy. But, he had service. But now the service, he had no more service. So he gave it up. He left. When it describes his leaving, it describes how he was hurt. The words of Duryodhana did hurt him. They pierced him. Like, what is it? Arrows in the ear. That was his feeling. But quickly he just took it. This is Krishna. Then he turned around and left. Hare Krishna. Yes, Joseph.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful class. And this idea of surrender, really, not such an important aspect of development.
6 divisions of surrender, yeah.
6 divisions of surrender, such an important aspect of Krishna consciousness. But what's to be said about the understanding of surrender when we're giving sort of more responsible positions, especially within the movement? So we see a lot of the time when devotees, their level of surrender usually then equates to them getting some position of service, and that service then comes with more responsibility, where they have to manage more things and be responsible for more complex aspects. And then the understanding of surrender for those people in those positions, does it become more complex, or does it become more simple? They just have to, because they're usually in a position where they have many different things working under them and having to manage them.
Well, perhaps the application of these principles may become more complex, yes, because it becomes a little more difficult perhaps to figure out what's favorable, what's unfavorable when you're faced with different options, would this be best or that be best? You have to make decisions, and you don't always, the principle is there, but the execution may be more complex. And this surrender required in order to receive Krishna's guidance and Krishna's support may also be at a deeper level, because just like we see in the when you're faced with very, very trying circumstances and you've tried to figure it out and you've tried to do, and ultimately then you have to surrender and let Krishna take care of it. So sometimes the compulsion for depending on Krishna, because you may be more challenging. Because it's not that we just, the first part of surrender is that we have to accept service. And we have to accept and not reject the opportunities to serve with our intellect, our minds, our bodies. We have to use all these things. We have to accept that. So we can't reject and say, well, Krishna will do everything. We have to work for Krishna. But then sometimes we have to just come back and say, Krishna, I'm trying, I'm doing, but you are ultimately in control, and I am now handing it over. I've done what I could. And faithful that Krishna will take care of it in whatever way he does. So yes, there is, and that's one of the, I think, the reasons that Srila Prabhupada did encourage and give service, challenging service to his disciples. He consistently gave challenges to invoke, to push us into more and more surrender. Surrender doesn't mean, I'm surrendered. Go to sleep. You know, that's not surrender. That is surrender, but it's surrendering to the modes of ignorance, not to Krishna. Surrendering to Krishna means, starts with this particular, accepting everything that's favorable, and that means all that service that's being offered to us, it's all good. Bring it on. And that sleep, that's not so favorable. Take it away, give it up. I'm not so good at that, so I don't want to toot that horn too loudly, because I can't show myself as an example. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada did that. He just, sleep, not favorable. So this is the art. This is what we have to learn. Hare Krishna. So I'm taking too long. Hari Bol, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Hare Krishna.